One heck of an omelet, posted by Bellrocks. We all know the saying, in order to make an omelet, you gotta crack a few eggs. A very down-to-earth saying with a lot of meaning and truth behind it. I guess you can even apply this saying to revenge in some cases, particularly my story of revenge. A story of revenge so great that it might be one of the best cases of revenge so far in the year 2016, or at least I tell myself that. In the end, unfortunately, there was some collateral damage, but hey, you know the saying. I'm a former Marine living in a semi-small town that I'm not from, trying to make ends meet while I wait for my tech school to start this summer. I've been out of the Marines for a few years now, and after partying day in and day out and making ends meet by bartending at various bars around my state, I've finally convinced myself that it's time to stop being a man-child and work toward a stable career. Hence, I've enrolled myself into tech school. In the meantime, I figured I could squeeze as much as I can out of the service industry until I complete school and graduate. Well, that was the plan, and it still is, but not at the restaurant or bar that I thought it would be. I moved to this town from another state with my girlfriend due to a tragedy in her family. After living off savings for a few months, I decided to snag a job to make things easier to stay afloat. I ended up at a quaint little restaurant very close to where my girlfriend worked. A restaurant recently reopened by its corporate ownership after a terrible franchise owner had control of it. All of the staff were new hires, from the top to the bottom. The restaurant was now full service as opposed to ordering at a counter. It had a beautiful mahogany bar that meshed well with the theme of the restaurant that was sectioned off from the dining side of it. Great food and even better drink specials, the perfect place for me to make ends meet while I attend school. It was convenient in so many ways. My girlfriend and I could save gas by driving in one vehicle when our schedules matched. She could come eat lunch or dinner on her break and get a discount on food. Things just seemed perfect. When I first started working at this restaurant, management seemed to really like having me around. I was very good at entertaining guests. I brought people into the bar and I was great at making drinks. One night stands out the most. I had a couple walk into the restaurant minutes from closing. Often when this happens, you'll get a server who is upset that they have to do their job a little longer, and that will reflect on their service. Not me, it's their money, and we're still technically open 10 minutes until we close, so I'm going to treat these guests just like I would any other guest. The couple clearly had a great night and left me a very big tip. The next day, I was shown an email that was sent to corporate with nothing but praises about my service and attitude. I assumed it was from the same couple, but who knows? After that incident, the atmosphere and management's attitude toward me seemed to negatively shift. Before we get into that though, let's discuss the management team. First, we have the GM, the general manager. Let's call him Jack. Jack is a round man in his early 30s who, on the surface, seems like a stand-up guy. You'd think he'd have your back until the bitter end when you first meet him. Then we have Nessa, the assistant GM. Nessa is a short woman in her late 40s, and my first impressions was that she is a quiet but professional woman, does things by the book. And finally, we have Courtney. Courtney was the, quote, bar manager, and I'll explain these quotations a little further in the story, and from the get-go, Courtney rubbed me the wrong way. Courtney was in her late 30s and never really smiled. Something about her just seemed dishonest. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first. Oh, and I should also mention Kara. Kara was a woman about 29 years old, and she was best friends with Jack, the GM. She was the other bartender for the restaurant that would work shifts that I didn't work. In the end, I had nothing but great things to say about Kara, and I didn't want things to end the way they did, but hey, you know the saying. Now back to the story. After receiving the positive review, I noticed I would get flack from both Nessa and Courtney for little things. They would reprimand me in rude ways without any tact. One night, Nessa, out of nowhere, told me I was arrogant. Of course, I defended myself, and this caused a dispute that ended up with both of us apologizing. I still have no idea what I was apologizing for, but hey, I just wanted a peaceful end to the matter. Another day, Courtney pulled me aside as I came in for my shift and told me that the guest had told her that I was giving them free drinks. She tried to get me to fess up to this, and I vehemently denied the claims. I even told her to check the cameras, or I'll have Jack check the cameras. I never, ever stole from the bar or gave people free drinks. Then, there was that time that I came in for a shift, and Courtney immediately jumped down my throat for leaving the tables a mess. Later, it was proven to be a lie, before leaving the bar after closing. She says this as she walks out the door from her morning shift, leaving 3 tables unbussed. It was like something out of a comedy sketch. Another thing that may have struck you as odd, Courtney, the bar manager, was scheduling herself bar shifts while getting management pay. Odd, right? My theory on this sudden change of attitude toward me from the management is that it may not have been so sudden after all. I don't think Courtney liked me from the start. I remember one time when I was training, I had to make an easy drink for a guest because she didn't know how to make it. She put pineapple juice in a Long Island iced tea. Yuck. This was probably embarrassing for her, and I remember the guest making a comment along the lines of, "Maybe he should be the bar manager, ha," said in jest, but I could tell that it really upset Courtney. I was also told by another employee that during a busy night over the holidays, Courtney told Nessa and Jack that she thought I was stealing from the bar. I can't verify these claims, but after the conclusion of everything that happened, I wouldn't put it past Courtney. This negative stigma towards me most likely rubbed off on Jack because, surely enough, his attitude toward me changed. I started to feel held hostage and regretted going to work. I felt as though my stature was being diminished behind my back, my reputation was being tarnished, and I was sinking in quicksand and had no way of defending myself when all of these claims were made behind my back. One shift, my girlfriend was on her lunch break, and while I was in the back getting side work done, Jack had made a rude comment to her or was very rude to her. She wasn't clear when she told me about it later that night, but she didn't feel comfortable going back in there. Her feelings were hurt. I confronted Jack about this, and he just brushed it off and quickly changed the subject by telling me to find something to do. All of this hate would soon hit a boiling point, and that's where the omelet comes in. A little over a week ago, I was enjoying a night off. Me and the girlfriend watched some Making a Murderer, which is ironically relevant to the story, before both drifting off to sleep. I woke up bright and early the next day, did some laundry, and got some cleaning done while my girlfriend slept in. She works 2 jobs and deserves it. I took a shower and prepared to head into work, hopefully making some good tips. I walk in 5 minutes early, and the managers are all at a table outside of the bar talking. They see me walk in and sat me down. They told me that the night before, someone had served a minor some drinks, and it got reported to the police somehow. Shoo, wasn't me, I thought. Well, I didn't even go to work that night, and hey, I always ID people that I'm unsure of. They told me that I need to be sure to always ID people, and I assured them that I do. Both Jack and Nessa walked off to the dining side. I talked with Courtney a bit, and the conversation was a bit odd. She said, yeah, we need to be sure to ID people, and you probably just assumed he was 21. I cut her off and told her that it wasn't me who worked last night. She stuttered back, oh, I meant Kara. Yeah, it was Kara who messed up. Kara, who I really loved working with, but who was also best friends with Jack. So you can assume how things were taken care of. This would have immediately been my termination if it were me in Kara's shoes. I didn't hold any grudge. I was glad she kept her job. After the doors were locked that night, Nessa came up to me and brought up the underage incident. Again, it was odd. She spoke kind of loud, but not rudely, and told me that I need to be sure and ID people from now on so that this doesn't happen again. I stood my ground, and I told her that, with all due respect, it was not me who served the kid. She said, look, I know, I'm just saying. What were they trying to pull here? I had the next day off, chilling in my apartment all by myself, playing Hearthstone, eating like a pig, when my phone buzzes. It was a notification telling me that I need to come into work an hour early because the managers were having a meeting. No sweat, more hours, more money. I continued doing my thing, and the next day I go in an hour early as instructed. Once again, the managers are sitting at a table near the bar. They all stare at me as I walk in, and things didn't seem right. Jack tells me that he needs to talk to me. Jack and Nessa both sit me down in the dining area, and Jack tells me that he heard that I had a dispute with Nessa a few weeks back, and he can't have that attitude around here. He tells me that he is letting me go. I was shocked. I told him that me and Nessa already hashed out our differences, and this happened weeks ago. I look over at Nessa, and she shoots me a smirk. Well, now you're talking to your GM about it. I felt the Marine in me start to come out. I was getting angry and about to do something stupid. It took everything in me not to throw the table over and punch Jack right in the jaw. I took a deep breath, stood up, told them good to go, and walked out. And Courtney was sure to give me a sarcastic bye as I walked out the door. What the heck just happened? This was weeks ago and they are firing me for this? This can't be right. I get to my car and slam my hands down on the steering wheel. I was so angry. I just wanted to call my girlfriend and hear her tell me that everything was going to be all right. I grab my phone and find her name in my contacts, and I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to break the news? Hey babe, they fired me for no reason. Jack is such a prick. Kara served someone underage and nothing came of that, but they fired me for something that happened weeks ago. I didn't hit the call button. I put my phone down, and then it hit me all at once. These jerks were trying to burn me for what Kara did. Since it got reported to the police, somebody needed to pay, and it sure as heck wasn't going to be Kara. I peeled out as I left the parking lot, not because I was angry, but because I needed to act fast. If I didn't act fast, they would get away with murder. Most of the people who join the Marines join to fight, and as crazy as this sounds, this is largely why people enlist in the infantry side of the Marines. People like us have a desire to fight, and the Marines is a great outlet. Most Marines love fighting, and most of us love conflict. We thrive off of it, and we know how to react when the cards aren't in our favor. We are generally some of the nicest and most loyal people you will ever meet, but you don't mess with a U.S. Marine. I open my door and rush to grab my laptop. My girlfriend asks me what's wrong, and I quickly say, nothing, babe, got fired, love you. I grab my laptop and sit on my recliner. She says, what? I just motion with my hands 1 second as I load up Google. I find the restaurant's corporate website, and it didn't have a number for corporate, but it did have the email address of every single franchise in the company. Even better, I thought to myself. So I wrote a long email to a franchise, copied and pasted it to every other one. I explained in detail about the favoritism that was happening with Jack and Kara. I explained how Kara had served someone underage, and I had the feelings that they were trying to pin it on me. I explained how Courtney would get manager pay while taking tips as a bartender. I explained how Nessa would occasionally have me make a drink, and she would give it to her teenage daughter, who also worked at the restaurant. I provided times, dates, and even showed them the email that I'd sent to our state's alcohol control about the underage drinking incidents to ensure that my hands were clean. I explained how an expensive bottle of Jack Daniel's Sinatra seemed to have a leak in it nights after Jack had worked. Every bit of dirt that I ever saw or heard about, I put in that email, and I let every franchise in the company know about it. I demanded that I get a call back, and I also demanded that I get my termination papers to make sure I wasn't being framed. I typed so fast, and things just seemed to melt into place as I made the email. My fingers were my weapon, and you don't F with a Marine. My girlfriend is staring at me the entire time. What the heck is going on? I finished the email and explained to her the situation. She asked me if I'm afraid others will get into trouble, and I tell her, well, you know the saying. I fill out applications, and the same day I get a call from a very well-known and popular restaurant. They want me to come in for an interview the next day. Perfect, I already have another job. I didn't hear from corporate at all that day, and it was very late in the afternoon, so I expected as much. The next day, I get a phone call early in the morning. It's corporate HR that owns the restaurant I worked at. She tells me that they are on their way to the restaurant to investigate my claims. She asked me a bunch of questions. I'm guessing that I was being recorded. I stayed consistent and honest. She tells me all of the things that I mentioned in the email were 100% against company policy, but the claims would have to be investigated before any action was taken. I asked her if they have access to the camera feed, and she assured me that they did. Oh, thank God for cameras. She told me to call back immediately if I could remember anything else that was going on. We hung up, and I got dressed and headed out the door for my interview at my new potential job. Well, the interview couldn't have gone any better. I met most of the management at this team, and I got such an amazing vibe from them. They even want to cross-train me as a bartender almost immediately. Most of the time, this place only promotes from within, so they really must have liked me. So I got the job, and I'm going to try my hardest to be a great employee. Anyways, back to my revenge story. I later got word from an insider that they indeed did try to pin the underage incident on me. Little did they know. I'm lying in bed that same night, drifting off into sleep listening to some of Sam Harris's podcast. My girlfriend is sitting up in the bed browsing Facebook. All of a sudden, she gasps. She startled me because I was almost asleep. I jump up and ask her what's wrong. She shows me her phone. Wow, I say calmly. I guess things were worse off there than I thought, but dang, I didn't expect things to get taken that far. Well, you don't F with the Marine, I thought. I got out of bed and made some sweet tea. Do you feel bad? The girlfriend asked. Well, babe, you know the saying. And I think this story right here, as we reflect back on it, if you look right here on the screen, or if you're driving, don't look, this is a Facebook post that OP made with everything censored, showing that the restaurant did in fact get shut down completely. They must have went in and ripped and torn them from the inside out because there was nothing left of this restaurant, as there should not be. Way to go, OP. Got my freshman dorm leader fired a year after he called the cops on me. Posted by ReedG1. I first got to college my freshman year and met the dorm leader, RA at most schools, and like most colleges, the dorm leader was the upperclassman that lived in the dorms and monitored the freshman halls. My dorm leader's name was Julio, and at first, he seemed like a nice dude that minded his own business. He talked about how he would stay out of everyone's business if we would stay out of his. Also, he tried to be the cool dorm leader and always mentioned to me about how he drank tons of alcohol his freshman year in the dorms. He gave off the impression that he didn't really care if we ever drank in our dorm rooms, but to just keep it on the low if we did. I really didn't drink much at all, but I appreciated the fact that he seemed pretty normal and didn't try to rat on kids. During the last week of October of my freshman year of college, I had one of the hardest weeks of my academic career. I was a biochemistry major taking some pretty tough classes, and I had 3 exams that week. At the end of the week, a friend I had recently made down the hall invited me to his dorm room to watch an upcoming NBA game. As we were watching the game, he had a bottle of vodka and gave some to the guys in the dorm. Being a naive and stupid freshman kid just trying to make some friends, I took one shot of vodka and continued to watch the game. As we're watching the game, one of the guys in the dorm spills a bottle of soda and rushes to the bathroom to grab some paper towels. As he walks out of the dorm room, Julio walked by and noticed the bottle of vodka. He laughed and said something of the sorts of, "I remember when I was a freshman, just try and keep it down." And we thanked him and told him to have a good night. It seemed like a normal conversation and nothing out of the ordinary. 30 minutes later, we hear a knock on the door and 2 policemen showed up with breathalyzers. They told us that they'd received a complaint from Julio about underage drinking and a party being thrown in the dorm room. Remember, it was 3 guys watching a Lakers game on a Thursday night at 8 p.m. I ended up getting a minor in consumption charge for blowing a .02. Had to do 20 hours of community service, a reflection journal, and appear to the Judicial Affairs Center at my college about my supposed drinking problem. I'm not blaming the officer for giving me a ticket, but I was pretty upset that Julio, who always talked about getting messed up freshman year in the dorm, called the police right after he essentially gave us the okay for the night. A few weeks later, I see Julio and straight up asked him why he decided to rat me out. Specifically, I asked why he didn't just tell me to head back to my dorm if he had a problem with the alcohol instead of calling the police right after our conversation. He responds word for word with, "You made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." After that incident, I never really talked to him, but he always tried to be buddy-buddy when he saw me in the hallway. Anyway, I eventually leave the dorms and move off campus for my sophomore year. I had decided to rush a fraternity my freshman year and ended up meeting some really nice guys. I had never been the fraternity type, but I went to a smaller college where fraternities are a lot different than most places. During the second semester of my sophomore year, my fraternity was taking a new pledge class. One day, I received a text from Julio saying, "One of the guys pledging your fraternity has been caught dealing alcohol to another freshman in the dorms. I thought I would let you know." Turns out Julio was the dorm leader for a freshman pledging my fraternity and ratted him out to Judicial Affairs as well. Thinking the term dealing alcohol was the lamest yet funniest thing I've ever heard, I sent that to our fraternity GroupMe and everyone laughed about it. About a week later, that kid pledging our fraternity came up to me asking about the message I received from Julio. Essentially, a pretty similar thing happened to him like what happened to me. Julio found out that he'd given another kid in the dorm a bottle of wine and reported it to the police. This kid ended up getting a minor in possession and had to speak with Judicial Affairs. This is where the story gets hilarious. In his meeting with Judicial Affairs, the kid pledging our fraternity told the Judicial Affairs guy that his dorm leader, Julio was now a senior at this point, had texted me about the charges pending against him. Apparently, it's a huge violation to discuss pending charges against a freshman in your dorm to a third party. The Judicial Affairs guy told him that if he could prove that Julio was discussing this charge with a third party, aka me, he would receive some severe sanctions. Basically, if I sent that text to the Judicial Affairs people, Julio would be in a load of trouble. So I sent the text that night to the Judicial Affairs people. After that, I didn't hear anything about what happened to Julio and had honestly forgotten about it. However, nearing the end of the school year in my sophomore year, I saw Julio at the dining hall and came up to speak to me. He tells me a story about how he knows I was the one that ratted him to the Judicial Affairs, how he ended up getting fired from his dorm leader position, lost the scholarship money his dorm leader job provided him, and overall, how crappy his life has been since he got fired. After going through his entire sob story, he asked me, "Why did you do that? This could have been handled completely differently. I didn't have to get fired and I could have kept my scholarship money." I look at him dead in the eye for what seemed like 30 seconds and say, "Julio, you made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." Well, I think the OP did the right thing. The dorm leader was very two-faced and the rules didn't apply to him. Well, actually, yeah, they do. He was put in his place and hopefully he learned from it because, Julio, if you're listening to this right now, you messed up, man. You messed up. The secret phrase of this video, comment below, is excellent because there's a pun behind it. Be sure to check out another video here. My name is Austin. Thank you for watching.